Allow me to introduce myself.
I am the last sane sports fan.
I am a genius by trade.
I just knew too much. Does that make me crazy? Does that make me crazy? Does that make me crazy? Possibly.
Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to The View from the Midwest. Today we're going to touch on a couple NFL topics that came out in the last few days. The first one, obviously, Adrian Peterson finally reported to OTAs and has rejoined the Minnesota Vikings. And I think that's the wise decision. He could have easily held out and tried to force a move from the Minnesota Vikings after their head coach came out about a week ago and said that Adrian Peterson can either play for us or nobody. It's funny because normally in those instances I don't like such hardline standings in terms of dealing with a player like that. But in this instance, I really hope that the Minnesota Vikings do that, unless somebody comes to them and just wows them with a trade. You have to do what is best for your organization, and if somebody is willing to bet the farm on trying to get Adrian Peterson over to their team, then maybe you have to really take a hard look at that. But from the way things are built right now, I think the Minnesota Vikings did the right thing. They basically said, hey, we did what we needed to do in your situation. You need to get over it and come back to work and try to help us win football games. Adrian Peterson, I try to understand things from the player's aspect more often than not, but in this instance, I just really can't. Because basically, he got all butthurt that the Minnesota Vikings didn't stand behind him and that they suspended him for his legal troubles, which he ended up being absolved from a legal standpoint. But basically, it boils down to this. You felt it within your rights to pretty much beat your kids. Maybe it was only on the butt, maybe it was on the back. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you think that that kind of punishment is good for kids. It doesn't matter whether you think that that should never exist anywhere in the entire world. The fact of the matter is, it does bring up a legal position that the Vikings had to take a stand on. They didn't know whether or not they were going to have this player available. They didn't know if the NFL was going to suspend him. They had to take action that they thought was best in their best interests. Adrian Peterson has every right to feel upset that they didn't stand behind him, but you can't tell me that any team, outside of maybe the Dallas Cowboys or, I mean, I'm sure there's plenty out there, but I just like to poke fun at Jerry Jones. I don't know of any other NFL team that would have, quote-unquote, stood behind Adrian Peterson with these kind of accusations of child abuse, standing behind him. Now, again, whether you support him, say, well, it's just old school tactics, and he was getting a switch and taking his kid out behind the woodshed. That kind of stuff used to happen all the time. It doesn't happen as much now. Did it need to happen? Did he go too far? These are all questions you have to answer for yourselves, and the people that really only know are the children, potentially Adrian Peterson's wife, and he himself. But again, there was no need for the Vikings to stand behind him. No NFL team in their right mind would have stood behind him. Now everything is back to a position to where Adrian Peterson can play in the NFL. He needs to go back to the Vikings. If he wants to force a trade, do so, but do it the right way. Don't necessarily just be a little baby saying, oh, well, they didn't support me, so now I just want to take my ball and go home. Play for the Minnesota Vikings. If you can get traded, so much the better for you. But he's doing the right thing, I think, in the going to OTAs. One other thing on the NFL side I wanted to talk about, Cam Newton is apparently going to be given a huge contract by the Carolina Panthers that will make him a Panther, in theory, through 2020. Regardless of what it is, he will be paid an annual salary close to $20 million. There is no way, in my estimation, Cam Newton deserves $20 million a year. Yes, statistically, he has one of the best records from November on in the NFL, but that hasn't translated into playoff wins. That hasn't translated into a Super Bowl appearance. Basically, they're banking on the fact that Cam Newton is getting all these advertising dollars. He's good for the league. He doesn't get into trouble. He keeps himself fairly clean. Doesn't put his name out in the media a lot. And that is beneficial to a football team. But I think that is a big reason why they're doing this. Because in terms of on-the-field performance, Cam Newton has not necessarily lived up to the hype of transforming the Carolina Panthers into a Super Bowl contender. They're a better team with him than they probably would be without him, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're worth $20 million a year. Now, as we've seen in the NFL, contracts, the way they're worded, mean very little because basically you're only guaranteed what you're guaranteed. I don't remember what the guaranteed money was on his contract. It probably varies year to year. But again, I just don't know that Cam Newton has done enough to really justify paying him that kind of money. You're paying him for, it's kind of rare that basically they're paying him for what they're still prognosticating him to do in the future. Most NFL contracts are given based on what you have done in the past. Very similar to baseball contracts. Basically, once you have done all your great stats, then they're going to reward you with a big contract, and then all of a sudden that usually doesn't work out because they fall off the face of the earth. I don't think Cam Newton's going to fall off the face of the earth. I think he's a good quarterback. I just don't think he's worth $20 million a year. If I was a Panthers fan, I wouldn't want them spending that kind of money. I would want Cam Newton as my quarterback, but they need other things. You can't just have Cam Newton and then nobody else. They need to build that team from within, and spending so much money on one position isn't necessarily the wisest thing, but that is what the NFL likes to do. But again, I don't agree with it. I don't think Cam Newton is a $20 million quarterback yet. He's definitely not one now, maybe one in the future, but we'll have to wait and see on that. That is today's View from the Midwest. What are your views on the topics that I talked about today? Do you think Adrian Peterson was right to be mad at the Vikings? Do you think Cam Newton's a $20 million quarterback? Leave us a comment down in the comments section. Comment, rate, and subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, give us a thumbs up. If you're watching on Facebook, share it around with your friends. But until the next time, I'll see you then.
I remember when I lost my